So you've set up your new game in FM24. You've gone through all that first day stuff. You've looked at your staff. You've looked at your squad. You might have even picked a tactic. And you finally hit continue for the first time. What on earth do you do now? Hello folks, and welcome to the first week in Football Manager 2024. This is actually part of a series of tutorials for new players to the Football Manager franchise. They're all playlisted up on the channel, so if you haven't seen the first two, the Beginner's Guide, which is all about setting up your game to work the way you want it to work, and First Day, which is everything that happens before you hit continue for the first time. Go watch those first, but if you're pretty much up to speed and you just want to see how I handle the first week or so in-game, then this is the video for you. Make sure you subscribe, turn your notifications on, leave a like, all that good stuff as well, and let's jump into it. So we have pressed continue for the first time. It's now 9:03 a.m. on our first day. Sorry, it's 9:09. We've got another email after this one, but 9:03 a.m. on our first day after we've done all of this stuff that we did in that first morning before we hit continue for the first time. And it's presenting us with training. Now, training is one of those areas that you can be really, really actively involved in or kind of leave alone and never really touch. And I don't know that it makes a huge amount of difference. It's certainly something you can really mess up if you try and do it yourself. But in my experience, it's something that you can kind of just leave well alone. Let your staff handle it and never really worry about it. You can see what's going on. You can check in with what they're doing. You can click on the training tab and be like, okay, is this the kind of training I want to do this week? And you can even make some tweaks. And there are a couple of tweaks that I'd probably recommend you do for training. We're going to work through these tabs and look at these little tweaks. Firstly, I'm not changing the bulk of this. Anything that the game has put in, I'm probably leaving in. The only exceptions to that might be if I really, really particularly want to focus on set pieces, I might add some focused set pieces training in. You can see we don't really have a lot of that in our preseason training at the moment, so that might be something we want to add in. You can see we kind of pick it up once the season gets underway, but we might want to start training that sooner. In fact, we've got a little bit of it. So maybe that would be enough. But the things that I tend to add in, certainly when you're new into a club, because when you're new into a club, you'll often find team cohesion not so great. You've brought in a new tactic. You're probably on the verge of bringing in lots of new players, maybe some new staff. Your team cohesion is going to be low. Your managerial support is going to be low. Sometimes the club atmosphere is low. And those things have a big impact in Football Manager. And that's something you can start to handle here in training. There's a couple of little things you can add into your training that make a big difference towards increasing your team cohesion as quickly as possible. So basically your team get used to playing with each other and maybe calming down any grumpy gooses, getting them used to your tactics, that kind of thing. And you can see some of these are already in on our pre-season. Team bonding is a crucial one. We've got that as part of our pre-season training, but then once the season starts, it's kind of dropped like a stone. There's not really any team bonding in there ever. So the team gets to the first day of the season and it's as bonded as it's going to get. So what I like to do is just add in one team bonding session every week. You can just do that by clicking where it says rest on there. So pick any of the places where we're currently resting. Be careful not to fill all of these up. If you fill every single one of these with an activity, your team are going to get broken. You're going to overtrain them. But you can click on rest, go into extracurricular, add in team bonding, and it actually says on each of these things the impact it's likely to have on the squad, so the things we're working on. So the impact of doing a team bonding session, happiness greatly increases. That's really handy if you're on a poor run. Team cohesion increases. It works on the teamwork attribute and will slightly reduce fatigue, but also slightly reduce conditioning as well. So it's one of those things you can't do it every day. In fact, it only lets you have one of these sessions per week. But I'd add that in. I don't want to take control of all general training. I think it's far too complicated. My staff are handling that, but I will add in my team bonding there, and I'll just go through once a week. I tend to just stick it in on a Tuesday just because it's usually the first slot that's free, and add in a team bonding session every week. Now, there are other things you can add in. If your cohesion is a total mess, you can also add in community outreach, because that will also slightly increase team cohesion, works on those teamwork attributes as well. But I find that when you're doing both of these, because they both reduce conditioning, as soon as you start adding in community outreach as well, you're probably going to have to take out another session from somewhere. And that's when it starts to get complicated and you're fiddling with schedules that the game is putting in place, and I'd probably avoid doing that. The one other thing I like to add in is immediately after a match, click on the first rest that you've got available. This can only happen the day after a match, but if you click match preparation, match review, if you add in a match review after every match, it really helps improve tactical familiarity and team cohesion. So again, when you're new into a club, I don't necessarily do this all the time. This is very much first season stuff. I'm not going to have this, and probably even first half of first season stuff. I'm doing this for as long as it takes for that team cohesion to start getting up where we want it to be. As soon as team cohesion is good to excellent, then I feel like this is probably time that you don't need to spend fiddling with this. But if you are looking to fast track that process early on, if you're finding your team just aren't playing well in your early matches, they're not playing the way you want them to play, by adding in match reviews after matches and team bonding midweek, you will find that that process starts to happen a little bit quicker. So as a new player, I'd just add it in. Other than that, leave the rest of the training alone. Like I say, you can go in here and there's all sorts of stuff you can deep dive on if you want to. And if you want to see a deep dive on trading video, let me know down in the comments. It might be something we add in later in the series. Deep diving on training is certainly not something to do during your first week in the job, though. I would leave all of this well alone, apart from mentoring. Sometimes you can click Ask Assistant to assign. I don't know why we can't in this save, but you can create mentoring groups. So we'll just call this group 1, and in a mentoring group, it very much is a case of you want to add in an experienced player in a certain role, and then add in some younger players who would benefit from their experience. So, for example, if we're at Arsenal, if we add in Jorginho as the head of this mentoring group, so we now want players who play in the same kind of position to Jorginho, who might benefit from him mentoring them and maybe passing on his resolute personality trait. You don't want to do this with someone who doesn't have a personality that you want to pass on the traits of. But with Jorginho, if we then have a look at other players who play in a similar kind of position to him, who are young and would benefit from having his knowledge passed down. Maybe Emile Smith-Rowe would benefit, so we can maybe add him in. Declan Rice is probably a little bit old to be in a mentoring group. Who else might we have who we could add into one? Maybe somebody like, where was he? Kiwior, I saw him somewhere. Fabio Vieira might benefit. Kiwior might benefit. And then you can just add those players in. And now you've got a mentoring group where you can see these two will have quite a strong influence on the group and also benefit from what's going on in the group. I don't fiddle with it too much. I tend to just click Ask Assistant to assign because it's helpful for passing on nice personality traits, but it's there. You can set those groups up yourself if you want to set them up. And then the only other thing I would fiddle with is your individual training, because you might have players that you want to play in different positions to the ones that they're playing in game. I don't get bogged down, certainly early on. Again, it's something for the future. I don't get bogged down in adding in specific player traits and stuff like that. But if I've got a player that I know I want to use differently to how they're set up, for example, if I've already decided that Gabriel Martinelli is going to be my striker, I'll go into his individual training and we'll train him to play that position. So we'll say, right, we want you to be training to play as an advanced forward. I don't want to take control of all your individual training. But then I don't want to do, you know what? I will take control of all his individual training. I want him training to be a striker, and we can set him up to train as a striker. That is all the training you need to do during your first week. I wouldn't fiddle with it any further than that. And then we've got our first weekly staff meeting. So we'll attend it. We'll see what our staff have got to say. And usually I find that these staff recommendations are probably worth following. So they're saying Declan Rice, we recommend Declan Rice becomes the new captain. With leadership of 16 and teamwork of 19, I'm not going to argue. Yes, Declan Rice can become captain. It's also recommending Fabio Vieira goes on a language course. I don't know why he's not already been on one, but yes, let's send him on his language course. Then we've got a couple of informational things to be aware of. So some high potential players who we might want to keep an eye on, maybe either loan out like they've already done with Lokonga, or maybe offer a little bit of extra game time to. So Reece Nelson could potentially be as good as our second best left winger, Leandro Trossard. I mean, that's not glowing praise, really. I'm not sure how excited I am about that. But Jurriën Timber has the potential to surpass Gabriel, which that's very exciting. I'd probably give him lots of game time, although I think he starts the game injured, so we probably can't. But we'll end that meeting there because that's all they wanted to do for that first meeting. We'll have another one next week. If you find those meetings a bit pointless, you can change the frequency of them as well to weekly, fortnightly, monthly, or you can even make it so you never have those meetings. I don't see there's a downside to having them. I just don't need to have them very often. So in the previous video, we set up the tactic that we're going to be looking to use. Now we're going to have a look in the squad planner and work out if there's something we need to do scouting or transfer wise to add into this squad. And I remember we had a little fiddle with, let's just reassign everybody again, just so that we don't have that fiddled with the way that it was. So as a reminder, we've got quite a small budget of only £5 million to spend. So we've not got loads of money to throw around, so I suspect there's not going to be much we can do in the way of transfers in the first window with this squad. But even if we can't do transfers now, we could potentially start coming up with plans for transfers we might want to do in the future, or we might be able to sell some players to generate some money to maybe do some transfers. So if we go through position by position, goalkeeper, it's fine. We've got 2 okay goalkeepers and a young homegrown backup. That seems like the perfect setup for goalkeepers for me. Don't need to fiddle too much with goalkeepers. Let's have a look at left back. So if we look at the players that are actually going to play left back, so Timber is out for a year. So as much as he's going to be as good as our best defender, etc., for the purposes of this season, I'm just removing him from the squad planner because he's not here for a year, so we kind of have to pretend he doesn't exist. We can take him into account again next season. So at left back, we've got Zinchenko, and then Tomiyasu, Kiwior, and Cedric can all play there a bit. And then at right back, we've got Tomiyasu, Ben White, Thomas Partey can play there, and then Cedric as well. And then centre back, Saliba, Rice, Gabriel. I mean, again, I'm not going to play Declan Rice at centre back. So we've kind of got those 4, maybe 5 centre backs if you count Tomiyasu. We really want, if we're playing a back 4, we really want 8 defenders. So we've got, because so many of them can play multiple positions. So we've got the 4 there, 5, 6, 7, but those 2 were already around. And then I guess Partey makes 8. So we've got 8 defenders, so we probably, it's not that we've immediately got spares we can get rid of. However, one of them does stick out like a sore thumb as somebody who's just not going to be good enough to get in our team and might be an area worth upgrading. So Cedric is our 4th choice left back and 4th choice right back. He is not getting anywhere near this team ever. So let's try and get rid of him. Let's ask his agent if there's any interest in him. So we say we're keen to sell him. The agent's saying we could probably get some offers around 1.5 to 3.3 million. And I'm like, yeah, go for it. Let's see if we can get him off the books. It then offers us a tutorial on how to sell players. Now, if you are playing this game for the first time, definitely do the tutorial. The tutorials are really good. They give you a lot of information about how these features work. Go through them, follow them. I'm not going to do it now because you can do it in your own game, but definitely when those tutorials pop up, follow the tutorials. So invited offers for Cedric. We now do the same in midfield. So in midfield, as our defensive midfielder, Rice, Partey, Zinchenko can play there, but he's probably not going to because we're using him at left back. We've got Jorginho, who's kind of a bonus extra player, and then Kiwior can play there. And El Neni, again, kind of sticking out like a sore thumb, the way Cedric was, so much worse than the other options we've got in this position. He can play in other positions as well. Is he good at those? Not really. Problem is he's injured. He's recovering from damaged cruciate ligaments, so it might be hard to attract interest in him, but let's try. We want to try and attract some money. And in fact, there are potentially going to be some offers. So yeah, let's offer him out as well, or invite offers for him. We're not quite at the stage of offering him out ourselves yet. So we're offering out El Neni because he's another one who's never going to get near our first team. And then we do the same again for central midfield. And we've got a lot of central midfielders here. We probably don't need this many, although we are offering out El Neni. Havertz is probably more forwards, Zinchenko more further back. But you look at someone like Emil Smith-Rowe, do we need him? I mean, he's got a huge amount of value, decent potential. He's obviously homegrown at club as well. If we really wanted to try and, bring in a big bunch of cash, that might be something worth exploring. We can ask his agent. We can say, I'm just curious. I am curious what kind of price we might get for Emil Smith-Rowe. So if we can get anywhere near 60 or 70 million for him as a player we're not going to use this year, that might be worth doing. The agent's saying, you know what? Not really. There's some clubs that might be interested. So now we could potentially loan him out to get him game time for this year. So we could offer him via transfer room for loan, as long as the loans cover his entire salary. We're going to lock that in because we want to make sure they cover his entire salary. And we can now offer him out for a loan because he's not going to get in the team. He's so far down the pecking order. You could potentially do the same thing with Fabio Vieira, but we might then be a midfielder short. I've kind of got it in the back of my mind that if we sell these players we're trying to sell now and maybe bring in a midfielder, maybe at that point, if we bring one more midfielder in, Fabio Vieira can be next out the door for either a loan or a permanent move. But for now, we'll leave him hovering there as an extra option and move on to the wide areas where, again, we've got loads and loads of options. And we look at these ones down the bottom of the pile and you look at someone, Smith-Rowe, Vieira, both down there again. You look at someone like Reece Nelson and wonder, how much football is this guy actually going to get? He plays in two positions. He's the 7th best left winger that we've got. So all these players are better than him and more likely to play for him than him in that role. He's the 5th best right winger we've got. But he is homegrown at club. He does have still some potential to improve. We've already been told in that meeting that he's got the potential to end up as good as Trossard, and he's homegrown. So if he's going to end up as good as Trossard and he's homegrown, that's quite handy because we'd like to have a homegrown player knocking around. He's not a million miles away from Trossard now. So is there maybe an argument to lose Trossard? Maybe there is. But at the moment, I think we're probably okay leaving things as they are because we've got other transfer stuff we can be working on in the meantime. And then we'll just look at strikers. And to me, this seems like an area where the club could probably benefit from bringing somebody in, because if you take out the players who are already first choices or already high up the pecking order in other positions, Martinelli on the left, Havertz in midfield, Trossard on the left, and he's out on loan. There's only 2 strikers at the club, and one of them is pretty high up the pecking order to play wide, so could drop out wide. So I think our transfer policy we're kind of forming in our mind is try and lose Cedric and El Neni and combine that money with the budget that we've got to maybe try and find a striker. So obviously we've got our scouts who have already been sent out doing their scouting thing. We allocated that to staff members. So we know that scouting is being taken care of. There is going to be a transfer meeting coming soon as well, where we can target that in a little bit more. But for now, I might just have a quick word with my director of football and say, what strikers are out there that we could maybe have a look at? They're probably all out of our price range, but let's scout them all. Let's start having a look at those strikers, and maybe one of them might be somebody that we could bring in, although we're not likely to have the kind of money for these 2 guys, certainly unless we can sell a Smith-Rowe or a Vieira to maybe fund that. So having done lots of fiddling, we can now hit continue a few more times because we're basically at this point waiting for some things to happen. And this is where you'll get a lot of tutorials come in. That, again, I'm not going to go through all these tutorials with you, but you should definitely go through and do the tutorials. This one is the set piece tutorial. There is going to be a separate video coming at some point in the future where we basically go through how to set up set pieces specific to how you might want them to work. At the moment, as you can see, my set piece coach is handling them, so I don't need to worry about them yet. But keep an eye out for that video if you are particularly interested in set pieces, because there will come a time, as with a lot of this stuff we've delegated to other members of staff, there will come a time where we take control back and decide to tweak and fiddle a little bit. But for now, we're just going to keep hitting continue. I don't need to worry about players as Arsenal manager who are going to the trial day. None of them are going to be good enough for us. If you're managing in the Championship or lower, though, you certainly might want to be scouting those players. We now set our code of conduct, which I pretty much exclusively ask my assistant to do. So I've clicked ask assistant to pick, which is behind my face. If I see anything on there looks obviously wrong, then I can tweak it, but I'm happy with that as it is. I'm just going to hit confirm. It's not an area I feel like I ever need to vary from the assistant manager on, really. But now it looks like we are starting to get some offers in for some of these players we've made available for transfer, and also some of the youngsters at the club as well. So this guy is a young centre back. Yeah, I mean, I'm quite happy for him to go out on loan. It might be nice if they cover his entire salary. Again, at a big club like Arsenal, it's actually not the end of the world if they don't. I could push that negotiation further. I really don't feel the need to, over £100 a week at Arsenal. And now we've actually had a transfer offer for this guy who, with only 3-star potential, he's never going to be good enough to play for us. So we'll let him leave as well. And then this one, again, never going to be good enough to play for us with 3 stars of potential. So we'll accept those offers as well. Again, you could negotiate them. You could try and drive those prices up as high as possible. I don't feel the need to, because the numbers are so small for a club the size of this one that it's kind of insignificant. But if they were more significant amounts of money, then obviously you could try and maximize them to generate some cash for yourselves. But this is a lot of our youngsters going to be heading out on loan, which is good because it frees up a little bit of wage budget for us. So let's get all these guys out. One thing to be careful of with these is if you've got a young player who's got a decent amount of potential that you're happy to loan out, but maybe don't want to go for a permanent transfer, before you accept them, just check that there's nothing in here about a permanent fee or an optional future fee. You want to take that kind of stuff out for the ones you actually want to keep. So keep an eye on that. And then we've got offers in for the players that we made available for transfer. Sometimes you will have the option to negotiate these, and it seems that sometimes we won't. We've got a lot of loan offers that have come in. He wants to discuss terms of all of these lot, but actually for me, the only one that's offering a fee now is Ajax, although they do want a wage contribution. So we now have to weigh up, do we want the cash now, but we'll have to pay a little bit of a wage contribution, or do we want to I mean, to be honest, all of those are wage contributions as well. I was wondering if there was maybe a loan that was going to pay all of his wages and then maybe have a future fee. There isn't, so I think we're just going to accept the offer from Ajax. We're going to turn down all of the loans because I've got no interest in loaning him out. If he turns down the move to Ajax, or if we didn't get any permanent offers in, then maybe we could look at loans, but it's not a player that we're particularly interested in keeping. I'm happy for him to go permanently, because that will then be £8.5 million going into my transfer kitty with the 5 million we've already got. Always keep an eye on how much you've got as your retained transfer revenue, because if that number is lower than 100%, you won't necessarily get all of the money that comes in to spend. They can sometimes be very, very low numbers, but for us, we've got 100% of the money we generate from selling players we can then use to buy new players. So that'll be 8.5 million. Assuming he agrees to go, that'll be 8.5 million added into the kitty. And then we've got some offers for Cedric as well. Varying amounts. This one's actually negotiable, but it's also the highest one. So I think I am of a mind to accept that one and then select all and give all of those other clubs an ultimatum of, well, look, it's 3.3 million is the price. You either want him or you don't. So we've told them that they have to pay that price. moving away from transfers again for a second, it's all action. As you can see, we're still only on the second day. We've now got the squad dynamics introduction, so you can get an idea of who your team leaders are. It's a page that you probably would have already looked at. We've had a little bit of a nose at it. We've not really gone too far down the other tabs on it yet, though, but we can see that our team leaders, Odegaard, Rice and Jesus, so they're the guys who are basically going to be running the place. We need to keep them happy, because if one of them gets unhappy, then it will very quickly filter down into the rest of the squad, particularly within the social groups that they're in. So you can see that there's an Odegaard, Jesus, basically established old school Arsenal social group, and then we've got a second social group that's led by Declan Rice, which is basically all the English players, and then Timber and Raya getting involved as well for whatever reason. But I mean, it's interesting that they've kind of split into English, not English on the whole, and these two haven't been at the club long enough to yet be in a social group. But the reason we've got this through is because we can have our little introductory meeting where we say hello to the squad and just introduce ourselves. So we'll introduce ourselves with these bits and bobs that you get come up in these meetings. I find the best way to make sure you don't upset your players is to say your targets are whatever your targets you've been set. So just roll them down from your board. So the board want us to reach the latter stages of the Champions League and qualify for the Champions League. So if we go back to our meeting, that's what we want to say to the players. So for the Premier League, if we tell them we want to qualify for the Champions League, you can see that's pleased them all. If we'd have said we want to win the league, there would have been at least one of these guys who were like, whoa, we can't win the league. If we'd have said qualify for the Europa League, they'd have moaned I wasn't being ambitious enough. So I tend to target it in with whatever the club vision is, and you're usually pretty much right. So I'm happy with that reaction. We were also given a target for Champions League, so we can tell them we want to reach the latter stages. And what do you know again? They're satisfied, they're pleased. Captain Declan Rice says it sounds good to him. You can do more of these. I don't really feel the need to. I've done my bit. I've made a good first impression. And as you can see, there we go. We've made a good first impression. We've actually boosted some of the morale quite significantly of some of these players. Like Jesus has had a hugely positive reaction, as has Eddie Nketiah, as has Smith Rowe. We've really done a job on morale there with an excellent team meeting. We've taken dressing room atmosphere pretty much maxed out, and we've done it all by just copying what the board told me to say. So don't vary from that too far, folks. You absolutely don't need to. We don't have any targets or promises, so we don't need to worry about that screen yet. And this is just updating us on injury statuses, so we know we've kind of already ruled Timber out for the season. Tommy Asu's going to be back. I know he's recently returned and is in peak condition. El Neni will be back soon, but hopefully should have left the club before he's fit enough to play again. Time for another introduction, another training, another instruction tutorial. That's the word I was looking for. Another one of those, this time for training. So again, make sure you do it. It's very handy. I'm not going to do it. Just a recap on how financial fair play is doing. And now we need to meet the media for the first time. I tend not to bother with this because I find it monotonous and boring and don't think it makes a huge difference. You may disagree with me and you might want to attend this press conference and experiment with answers. I genuinely believe it's something you don't need to worry about. I'm going to decline going. I'm not going to do a single press conference throughout the save, and I don't think it's going to make any difference at all. I'm sure some people will disagree with me, and you might enjoy that side of the game, or you might feel it's having a big impact. I don't think it makes any difference at all that I've refused to meet the media there. So I'm happy not meeting them. Right, there is an intra-squad friendly about to go on. If you remember from the first day in the job video, we've actually set our assistant manager to manage us in friendly matches. So it's not something we're going to watch. If you really want to get an idea of how your team play and get straight into matches, you can by all means watch your friendlies. I tend not to, because for me, friendlies are just about getting the team fit. But be aware that if you want to watch the match, if you want to see how the team are getting on, if you want to maybe try out some tactics, try out some set pieces that you've jumped ahead in the curriculum and decided to fiddle with, this is the time to do it. So by all means, play those friendlies if you so choose. But for now, we're just going to keep hitting continue. The the first team is going to play against the reserve team. And there you go. A nice little 3-0 win. And we are continuing to wait for transfer news to come in. So we've got the scouting introduction now. So again, another tutorial. It's all good stuff. And we've had another offer come in for one of our young players, which we are going to accept and just basically keep accepting all of these. We're happy to clear out all of these players that we're just never going to use. There's so many young players that we're not going to use. Right, we've had some news on Cedric. The clubs that we made the ultimatum with have opted not to make an offer to sign him. So if we have a look at our outgoing players on transfers, you can see that Cedric is now down to just the one club, Al Ettifaq. It's actually the club he wanted to discuss terms with, so he still should be relatively happy with that. But that does mean we've now moved another stage forward in the potential exit from the club of Cedric, and hopefully he agrees terms. We now have to set our training camp squad because we're going off on a training camp to England, apparently, where we're going to be playing Preston and Portsmouth because they are geographically very close to each other, as I'm sure all English viewers are aware. You have two options with how to set, well, three options of how to select your squad. You can do it entirely manually. I wouldn't bother. You can go auto select and it will just put your first team squad in. I tend to click auto select, include youth prospects, because then it will fill the squad up as much as it can with the players that you've got, and include loads of young players as well. So you can give them the opportunity to play in matches on this tour, be involved with the first team squad for the training camp as well. And I feel like it doesn't do any harm at all. Right. Nobody wants to take Emil Smith-Rowe on loan. Real Madrid have both requested playing wage and requested non-playing wage. So no, basically no one wants to pay the wages for Emil Smith-Rowe. So now I think we're probably thinking in terms of, right, well, let's integrate him back into the squad. Let's use him this year. If we've decided we have one midfielder too many, maybe at this point we now go back in and like, well, if we can't get rid of Smith-Rowe, is there any interest in Vieira? Let's talk to Vieira's agent, because we'd like to be able to afford one of these strikers. If we can go and get a Vlahovic or an Osimhen, that's a huge thing for us to get, but we haven't got the money for it. So maybe, is there any interest in Vieira? There isn't. So maybe there's not going to be a way for us to bring in a top-tier striker, at least on a permanent deal, this summer. There's always the option of doing a loan, but it is a little bit harder to do if it's a player. You can see I'm declining a media thing again. It's always going to be a little bit harder to do if it's a player who is wanted by the team that he's at. You're not going to get a player the likes of Osimhen or Vlahovic on a loan or a loan to buy. You might get somebody who is maybe the next tier down, but is the next tier down necessarily going to give us the kind of player that we're looking for? Maybe not, but let's get these sales confirmed. We're just, again, continuing to continue. We've got loads of offers coming in for this guy, Keon Edwards. So actually, I think at this point, we'll probably say, we've got the West Ham deal is the highest one. So again, we'll offer an ultimatum to those two. And we've brought in a physio. How very exciting. Right, we've got a couple of days left of our first week. Mohamed El Neni has rejected a move to Ajax, which is a big blow because we wanted that £8.5 million that he was going to generate. We can now go back to his agent again and say, hey, what gives, agent? Right, so you maybe can get me some lower offers. Let's try again then. Not ideal. We know he doesn't want to go to Ajax. If we get to the point where we can't get offers in for him anymore, then we can use the intermediaries. But intermediaries tend to get you a lower fee and you have to pay for the pleasure. But if we really get desperate and nobody wants him or we can't find a deal that he wants to go on, we can use the intermediary to try and force him out the door. But now we have our recruitment meeting, and recruitment meetings are important. So the first thing it does is it takes you through the squad planner stuff that we've already done. So we don't need to fiddle with the squad planner stuff. It then alerts us to any players whose contracts are expiring. So the fact that Jorginho's contract is expiring does make me think, okay, he was our third choice defensive midfielder. Is there any interest in him? I'm curious. There's not. We're probably just going to let Jorginho's contract run down. We're not likely to renew it. But we'll keep him around. Nobody else wants him. We may as well keep him around. And then we've got players who are currently we're trying to bin off. So it's suggesting I increase my asking price for El Neni. We already know no one wants to pay it. We'll do it for now. I suspect we're going to end up having to loan him out because we did get a lot of loan offers before. And now we're being suggested a recruitment focus of 15 to 17-year-olds. This is where I want to add one in because I want to add in the striker one. So these are the ones we're already doing. So we're already looking at right backs. We're already looking at players from all these different places. But if you click on active recruitment focuses, you can create a new one here. And we know we want a striker for transfer or loan. And we want him to be first team ready. So we want like a 3-star. Right, we want at least 3 stars of current ability, maybe 4 stars of potential. We want someone who, we don't want an old man. So they've got to be under 30. Realistically, we're probably going to want to go younger than that. It's going to be our top priority, which means they'll assign 4 scouts. If it was standard, just the 1. Ongoing, they'll check in when they need to. You can say what kind of role we want them to be able to play. So we can choose pressing. I think we probably will leave it a pressing forward. So we want a pressing forward who's already 3 stars of current ability, will fit into our system, and is under 30. So we'll ask for that. We'll see what they can do. We'll end the meeting. There will be another one of those meetings later in the summer where we basically get the results of that scouting. There you go. We've had those offers come in for those guys. And we now have some more loan offers for El Neni. And at this point, I think we're probably just going to have to accept one of, I mean, it gets him out of the way. None of these are particularly good offers. They're covering about half of his wages and have the option to give us £5 million for him down the line. So at this point, we can be like, okay, is there any possibility that we're going to use this guy at all? He's our 9th choice midfielder. There really probably isn't. So we may as well just get him gone. So we'll accept those. You can decide those offers aren't good enough and sit on him and maybe wait to see if you can get a better deal when you get to deadline day. I'm more inclined to just try and clear house now and work with what we've got, because at least it'll give us a little bit more wage budget to play with. And you can always move your wage budget and your transfer budgets around to try and find a way to squeeze in the players that you're looking for. But yeah, El Neni doesn't look like it's going to be ideal. And hopefully we can secure the Cedric departure as well. Is he any good? No, let's get him gone. Lots of transfer offers coming in. And we are pretty much now at the point where we are a week in. In fact, there you go. I have weekly saves set up and we have just hit a save point. So that was our first week in the job. So we know who we're trying to get rid of. We've got a vague idea of what we want to buy. We've got some training stuff set up. We've got a little bit more tactical idea of what we're going to be doing. And we've played some friendlies and started doing a little bit of scouting. So things are starting to move forward. The rest of your summer, the rest of the pre-season is pretty much more of the same. There's not any majorly new stuff that comes in from here. The next time you get any really new stuff is when you start playing your first couple of matches, when you start looking at things like the data hub, which you still don't have access to until you've played 3 competitive matches. So it's now just a case of kind of rinse and repeat that process for the rest of the summer. Try and get rid of the players you don't want. Try and bring in players you do want. Make sure your training stuff is working the way that it needs to be working. Play some friendlies. See how your tactics are working out. If this is where you want to experiment with tactics, set pieces, that kind of thing, this is the time to do it. And then we go off and play some matches and win the league and everyone's happy. It's easy, isn't it? Really, really easy. And this is also the point where I ask you to support the video if you want to see the series continue. Like I say, I've still got ideas for stuff we can do in this series. A video that really deep dives on tactics, one that deep dives on set pieces. They're kind of almost certainly going to happen. But if you want stuff like that on training, scouting, whatever else, let me know down in the comments section below. I'll keep making the videos for this series as long as you're asking for them and as long as you're enjoying them and people are watching them. I would like to do a whole massive playlist throughout the year of tutorials and deep dives on different parts of the game, but we can only do it if people care and want to watch them. So if you did enjoy it, please leave a thumbs up. It lets me know you found the video helpful. Subscribe to the channel, turn your notifications on for more stuff like this, more tutorial stuff, but also daily let's plays, experiments. Basically, if there's a kind of Football Manager content that exists, you'll find it somewhere on this channel. Thanks very much for watching, folks. Toodle pip.